I've got the Epstein files right here on my desk. Now she's saying, where's my desk? I must have misplaced my desk.
We know from Donald Trump having publicized what he was really thinking to her, she had to go up there and give on a show, and she gave a show, and that show was for one person.
Imagine that there is a fire alarm in the Senate. The democracy is ending alarm, and you've got to break the glass, and you got to pull the switch, and woo, the democracy is ending. That alarm should be being pulled right now.
This episode is brought to you by Revolut Business, the all-in-one business account to manage your finances.
Nothing makes you feel like a sucker faster than bad exchange rates.
Revolut Business, though, keeps it simple. Over 30 currencies at the same interbank rates that banks use, with plan allowance and during market hours. Don't want to track markets? Set automatic orders and price alerts to time your deal.
Paying salaries in places like Dublin or suppliers in Sydney, no problem. Revolut gets it there fast to more than 150 destinations and without blowing your budget.
Yeah, it really is global business without fine print headaches. It's transparent, it's quick, and it's reliable.
Exchange like an expert. Open a Revolut business account today by scanning the QR code on screen or using this link in this episode's description. Add money by the 31st of December 2025, and you'll get a 200 British pound welcome bonus or the equivalent in your local currency. Feature availability varies by plan. This offer for new business customers in the US, UK, Australia, and Ireland. Fees and terms and conditions apply. Welcome to the Residence Politics US. I'm Anthony Scaramucci.
And I'm Katty Kay, somewhere in the middle of New England. I'm not quite sure why. I'm on a long road trip.
All right, well, you look great, Katty. But I'll tell you who does not look great. That would be James Comey. James Comey's first court appearance.
Yes.
I'll tell you who also doesn't look great. Somebody like me, Pam Bondi. What a tense Senate hearing.
What a show.
And then, of course, our U.S. government also not looking great. It's still shut down. But I am surprised by this. The Democrats have gained some ground. So, Katty, take us into what we're going to be talking about.
So we're going to talk about those two things. Of course, there is news that there is a peace deal between Hamas and the Israelis in Gaza. I would urge you to go and listen to Alistair Rory on The Rest is Politics. They've been doing an amazing job following this story. We're going to talk about that on Monday, which is the day that the hostages may be actually released and when we will have more details from the talks. And also, Donald Trump has said he may be going to the region, possibly to Egypt, to the talks, or even to Israel to speak to the Knesset. So I think there'll be more to talk about on Monday. So we're going to save that for Monday and talk about it then. Okay, on to this week. And wow, so much has happened that we have a ton of things we could talk about, but we're going to home in on these Bondi hearings for a start. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, was summoned up to the Senate. Part of the Senate's oversight role is to have members of the administration. And she followed on a pattern that we've seen from Kash Patel, from Robert Kennedy Jr., of being combative with senators in a way that I have never seen in a previous administration, having covered American politics for the last 25 years. She was personally rude about them. She came in very hot, and I mean hot in the sense of, not in the Donald Trump sense of hot, when he says people are hot. She came in very hot, as in kind of high temperature. She did not answer the questions. She had lists in front of her. She looked down at her notes, and she had all these prepared attacks against the senators. And I thought it was a sort of depressing moment, really, Anthony, for the prospect of the state of the country, because she wasn't really answering the questions that they would have liked answered either on the Republican or the Democratic side, perhaps, but she was doing something that in its tone and manner degrades, I think, the democratic process and sets up a new norm of how future administrations will view the oversight role of Congress. I mean, no president, no White House likes the oversight role of Congress, but they don't usually show it in this incredibly combative way. What did you think of what she was doing and why she was doing it?
I just want you to imagine that there is a fire alarm in the Senate, but it's not really a fire alarm. It's the democracy is ending alarm, and you've got to break the glass and you got to pull the switch, and woo, the democracy is ending. Okay. And what I don't understand is that alarm should be being pulled right now. But it's not. But let's go over a couple of things, and then you tell me what the hell is going on with the United States Congress. So number one, I've got the Epstein files right here on my desk. I've got the client lists. And then remember, they brought those people into the West Wing, those right-wing journalists, and they handed them loose-leaf binders of nothing. Oh, by the way, I've got the Epstein files on my desk. Now she's saying, where's my desk? I must have misplaced my desk. Number two, senior people in the Department of Justice, objective, independent arbiters of justice, said no to the Comey prosecution. Donald Trump, we learned from the Wall Street Journal, is using direct messaging. So he's stupider than Peter Hegseth. He's going to use direct messaging, Katty K. Okay?
Just to fill people in on that, you're referring to the Truth Social post that Donald Trump put out last month saying, Pam, you've got to go after Comey. This is destroying our reputation. You've got to go after him faster. Get on with the case. And what he actually meant to do, according to the Wall Street Journal, is send that to her in private.
Yeah. So now we have this type of dependent, no longer independent DOJ. And we're going to prosecute Comey, and we know there's flimsy evidence there. Number three, we got a bag man. We got a bag man. Tom Homan, bag man. Katty, let me tell you something. I get you whatever you want from ICE. I need 50,000 in unmarked bills. But I want it in a Louis Vuitton bag, by the way, because I'm a stylish guy. They don't prosecute him. No problem. She's asked the question, what did he do with the bribe money? And then the follow-up question, did he file for the taxes on the bribe money? I mean, he's getting paid. Is he paying some of it to the IRS?
Fair enough question.
Nothing, Katty K. Nothing. Last piece. This is the one that really gets me. Okay. She's firing DOJ staff over not having the right priorities to Donald J. Trump and Pam Bondi. And she's wholly and totally politicized the Department of Justice. Attorney General Mitchell, who went to jail for Richard Nixon, is literally coming out of the grave on Halloween night. And he's going to say, Pam, how are you doing this 50 years later after Watergate? This is actually phenomenal. And so, Katty, my question to you, why isn't the fire alarm, the democracy is over fire alarm? Because while you and I are talking about this, the president and his team wants to pull the Insurrection Act lever. And I don't know, is Steve Miller showing them fake videos of people marching in the streets? Is Trump really this delusional, or is Trump just making up his own set of facts so that he can declare martial law and end elections in the United States? Okay, what say you about all of these things? But I've got the fire alarm pulled, and I'm like, dudes, you better get it together here, or we're going to lose the democracy to these morons. And there may be some of those generals in that 800 group of generals that like these bozos. Okay, go ahead, Katty. I'm sorry. I'm slightly undercaffeinated this morning. Let me just take out my candy corn cup here.
Are you undercaffeinated or overcaffeinated? Look, I think that what Pam Bondi did, perhaps because she's on a little bit of thin ice in the White House, or has been over the Epstein files, and clearly, as we know from Donald Trump having publicized what he was really thinking to her, not following through on this campaign of retribution fast enough with some of Donald Trump's allies, she had to go up there and give on a show, and she gave a show, and that show was for one person. And it's not the Pam Bondi that people I know and have spoken to who have worked with Pam Bondi in Florida, as prosecutors say they recognize. You and I were texting earlier this week. You say that is not the Pam Bondi that you recognize, but she is fully on board with, the Donald Trump program. She knows that she's been on a bit of thin ice. And so she had to do what increasingly members of the cabinet have to do, go full blast against the senators in order to prove that she is an absolute MAGA stalwart and in Donald Trump's camp. I agree with you. It was a depressing display. And there was two little bit of it that I thought were worth picking up on with you. On the Epstein files, it was nothing that Pam Bondi said, because she said she was not going to talk about it. But there was a question from Senator Whitehouse about reports that there are photographs of Donald Trump with semi-naked underage girls, young girls. And she didn't answer that at all. She just turned the attack back on Senator Whitehouse and said, how dare you say this about Donald Trump? But I thought it was interesting that a US senator raised that issue and made me wonder, what do these senators know and what have they seen that we have not yet seen? And the other thing that I thought was interesting was when Senator Durbin of Illinois, who also she attacked, said, listen, you're not going to answer for this today, but one day you will be held accountable for that kind of behavior. And I guess, I don't know if he's hinting at the idea that one day Pam Bondi would be impeached or something, they would take some kind of retribution. But it got to the idea of when you talk about the fire alarm and democracy, you have to think, what are the checks and balances? And one of the checks has to be elections. I mean, the only way that Senator Durbin can deliver on that promise of holding Pam Bondi accountable, of holding the White House accountable, of holding anyone else in the administration accountable right now is by winning the midterm elections and winning the 2028 election, but particularly by winning the midterm elections. If they can't win those elections next November, they have 3 more years of the process that you were talking about, right? And I guess we get to that, in the second half when we talk about the shutdown and whether it'll have any impact on Democrats' favorability or Republicans' favorability. But until they win an election, Senator Durbin's kind of whistling in the wind. And the administration is going to carry on doing the things that it is doing around the country and in Washington, D.C.
I think it's a brilliant analysis. I just want to add to it. She does not have presidential immunity. So Donald Trump can probably get away with a lot of this stuff, but she actually is over the line now. And lots of different laws and lots of different procedures. And again, we like being objective on this show. And so let me tell you a couple things she's doing that is working. Okay. She is doing a good job through ambiguity. Okay. Her testimony was staged ambiguity. So she was, limiting her direct exposure to these direct contradictions. She was sort of deflecting questions. You said she had that rhetorical device where she had a few puns or phrases that she was using on the Congress. That was a signal, Katty, to her base. Try to, this loyal base signaling. Look at how we're owning the libs here in the Congress. And I'm telling you, it worked for her with the president. I guarantee.
Yes.
The president called her afterwards. He got some highlights on his iPad from his buddies, and he called her afterwards. A great job, Pam. You're terrific, Pam. But listen, ladies and gentlemen, a democracy can die on a number of different ways. But one of the ways a democracy can die is misunderestimating, because we're going to use the George Bush word here, because even now liberals think George Bush was a good guy. He's got a 72% approval rating now. But we're misunderestimating Trump's weakness, Katty K. I'm telling you, he's only got a 37% approval rating. His health is bad. The economy is about to hit the shitter. I'm telling you that. We'll be talking about this in March, and hopefully Fiona will pull a tape where I said in November or October that the economy is going to crap out because the tariffs are out of control, right? Ro Khanna is running ads of a 22% increase in coffee. Well, guess what? The biggest coffee supplier to the United States is Brazil. We have a 50% tariff on them, and our coffee makers are eating half of it, but they're still passing through a 22% increase. And those things are rippling now through the economy.
One other thing quickly, the Chinese are not buying a single soybean from American farmers, which is causing problems with American farmers.
Devastation.
Obviously.
It's not just causing a problem.
No, it's devastating for soybean growers. Yeah.
And the Iowa Senator
Ernst.
Yes, no mas for me because I'm not doing a good job representing my constituents. Trump promised them XYZ, and they're getting goose eggs, getting zeros, and we're really suffering out here in Iowa. But just these 3 points, please listen, everybody. And if you're an American, call your congressman and say, hey, WTF, he's not as strong as he appears. Number one, the economy is weakening. Number two, what is everybody fearful of with this man? A couple of ICE videos? Okay, we've got to push back on this guy if you want to save your democracy. And they're uncertain, Katty. Trust me, I watched that testimony. It was staged. She did a good job, but you can see she's uncertain. You can see she's like, wow, they're pointing out all these inconsistencies with our system and our democracy. And this is a lesson from the great fiction writer Robert Harris, the great nonfiction writer Bill Shire, who wrote The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. You start out normal, Katty, and then you start to morph into something that you do not recognize in yourself. That's where Pam Bondi is right now. And the frog is getting boiled in a direction that Trump wants it to go. So last point, Robert Harris said in the book, Munich, it was a historical fiction. He said when he went through the research, the bureaucrats in Germany hated Hitler. These were the permanent employees in the government, and they were expecting Chamberlain to come from the British Empire to knock Hitler on his ass over the Sudetenland. And he didn't do that. He appeased him, and they were all confused. They thought, okay, this is our opportunity. Churchill's going to knock him on his ass, and we're going to get him from the inside and topple him. And Churchill did the exact opposite. Due to what, Katty? You know your history. Due to what?
Well, to thinking that if he went and he appeased him, then they could get some kind of deal with him.
We're doing that with Donald Trump right now, guys. That's exactly what we're doing right now with Donald Trump. So wake up, open the window like in Network, the 1976 movie. I'm mad as hell. Not going to take it anymore. And these guys are a systemic threat to this system. And Pam Bondi showed some ambiguity, Katty. Go look at the tape. Go look at her body language. She was like, oh, wait, whoa, everything they're saying is true from what I learned in law school. Oh, wait, whoa, everything they're saying is true when I was working for Jeb Bush. But, oh, let me look at my notes and come up with a turn of a phrase here to signal to my base.
Let's talk about the arraignment of Jim Comey, because I thought that was interesting too. Jim Comey arrived in a Virginia courthouse Wednesday morning, and he went in through a side door, at which point Steve Bannon on his podcast railed against this and said that this was an expletive. He said Jim Comey was getting special treatment. My understanding is the Comey family were in quite extensive negotiations with the DOJ around how he was going to present himself. He did go in a side door. They were expecting a whole ton of protesters out the front, which was part of the reason they gave for wanting him to go in through a side door. I don't know whether actually Jim Comey going in the front door and holding his head up high might not have been a better moment for him. But I thought what was interesting in a way, and it made me think of it just in relation to what you were just saying, is that there were not tons of protests outside the arraignment of Jim Comey, the FBI director who has been charged on charges that are so flimsy that there was not a single prosecutor from that court's district in Virginia who was there signing up to take part in this prosecution. They had to bring in 2 prosecutors from North Carolina. The only person who signed it was Donald Trump's personally appointed prosecutor in the case. But there were not big protests. And I wonder if what's happening around the country, we've had sporadic protests in Chicago that the president, that ICE members have slightly whipped up, it looks like from the videos. A journalist had a pepper bullet shot through her window by an ICE officer. And remember, these ICE officers, the 10,000 ICE officers who have been recruited, given bonuses of $50,000, they've had very minimal training in weapons use. These are people who've been kind of picked up in sort of recruitment fairs and are now going out on the streets and are in this position of interacting with the public.
These are likely January 6th insurrectionists
who are now getting $50,000.
Yeah, exactly.
And so the chances of something going wrong and becoming an emergency, I think, are fairly high. But outside Jim Comey's arraignment, there wasn't. It was like the weirdest thing about that arraignment is how normal it was. And to your point, this is becoming sort of normalized. We've now had 3 cabinet members in a row go up and berate senators. I've never seen that in a previous administration. This kind of rude language from a cabinet member to senators. I haven't seen it. It chips away at the kind of norms and sort of customs of democracy. It kind of takes away some of the oil that greases the wheels of democracy. It will then happen again in the next administration. If we now get used to people being arrested on charges that are very flimsy, but because we know the president wants a campaign of retribution, that starts to be normalized? What's to stop it happening in successive administrations? And I think that's what's worrying about all of this, is that, to your point about pulling the emergency ripcord, how much of this now just gets baked into the kind of cake of American democracy, whether it's retribution against your political enemies, whether it's stretching executive power, whether it's sending federal troops into other cities, whether it's taking power away from Congress. All of these little things that are happening at the moment, I find it hard to believe that a Democrat will come into power and say, okay, fine, we'll just go back to the status quo ante. Because they've seen what this president can do when he does maximize his power, when he shatters the norms. They've seen how much power he can amass in the White House. Why are they going to hand that over? But one thing that is interesting on the retribution stuff, there was I don't know if you saw this, there was a YouGov Economist poll came out just this week that showed that Republicans like it. And I've spoken to lots of Republicans and Trump supporters who say to me, yeah, the Democrats were doing this. Look, they did this endlessly. Obama did it. He used the IRS against his conservative enemies. Joe Biden's White House indicted Donald Trump not once, but 5 times. And I think that, this YouGov poll, the most interesting thing was that independent voters overwhelmingly don't like it. And who is it that swings elections in America? It's those independent voters. So the checks and balances have not all gone. And these polls showing that independent voters don't like it. And even actually some Trump voters who are better educated, who tend to be women, who tend to be older, they don't like what they're seeing. They don't like this politics of retribution and revenge. They don't think it's good for America. So I don't know, maybe it ends with this. Maybe Jim Comey is the last one. I think there will be more. But my big question is what happens in the future with the tone that is being set now. Isn't it likely that this just continues?
Well, I mean, it's very well said. We're going to take a break. When we come back from the break, we're going to go over the shutdown, which could last longer than a Scaramucci, and we'll explain why.
Since we have been talking a lot about ICE recently, and there's been a lot more activity on the immigration front, we thought it was worth taking some time to tell you about the man who is really behind all of that and behind much of this politics of retribution as well. Lurking in the background, of course, and whispering in Trump's ear at the moment is Stephen Miller. He's been with Trump since the very first term, since the beginning. He's the architect of the so-called Muslim ban back in 2017. He is one of the few who stuck right by Trump after January the 6th, which earned him a lot of credibility with his boss. And he is now a huge figure in the White House. He's driving a lot of domestic policy, and he's really driving a lot of what we're seeing around immigration and retribution. So we thought it was worth talking about him.
So, Katty, I've known Stephen Miller since 2016. People won't remember this, but he was actually Jeff Sessions' legislative aide, the senator from Alabama that went on to be Donald Trump's attorney general. His extreme views on immigration started young. He disowned a friend in middle school because of his Latino heritage. He railed against a diverse high school on right-wing radio shows. And, now he's Trump's most trusted advisor. I had unbelievable amounts of access to him and Donald Trump during the 2016 campaign, and I'm going to tell some of those stories. But he was suppressing this while working for Sessions. He's in full bloom now, Katty, for his ideological equal, Donald J. Trump.
Yeah, so if you want to listen to that episode, it is for our members only. You can sign up, of course, at therestispoliticsus.com. But Stephen Miller really is at the heart of everything that is happening in the White House at the moment. He has an enormous amount of power, and he has a lot of credibility with Donald Trump. So we think that's going to be an interesting listen for everybody. Welcome back to The Rest is Politics, US, where the US government is still not open. Amazingly, and may not be open for a little while, but Democrats feel like this has been a good week for them politically. It has not been a good week if you are a federal worker because you're not getting paid at the moment. But a couple of things have happened that have made Democrats think that they might come out on the right side of this shutdown. So just let me run through 2 or 3 of them, Anthony, and get your reaction to them. First of all, there are polls. I spoke to a Democratic pollster, Molly Murphy, yesterday, who showed me numbers that show that disapproval of the Republicans around the shutdown is growing faster than disapproval of the Democrats. She made the point that shutdowns tend to be defined by something critical, something that is more than just the fact that the US government is shut down. And she said there is a coalescing of opinion that this is about healthcare and the Republicans trying to take away Americans' access to healthcare, to make healthcare more expensive at a time when many middle-class Americans are already suffering. And so healthcare has become also synonymous with affordability. So she thinks Democrats are kind of have the right messaging on this. And the polls tend to suggest that it's the Republicans that are hurting. We had Marjorie Taylor Greene, the Republican congresswoman from Georgia, who railed against her party for trying to cut healthcare subsidies. She said that her own son's healthcare was going to double in costs, and that's about the national average. If you pay for your own healthcare in America, and some 25 million people signed up for healthcare just this year. So these are kind of people who do not get healthcare from their companies, but have to pay for their own healthcare, like my son has to pay for his own healthcare. Your healthcare premiums, the amount you pay for healthcare, is going to go from about $1,000 to $2,000. And of course, this is in red states like Georgia as well. So Marjorie Taylor Greene siding with the Democrats, they took that as a win. Donald Trump said he could lay off federal workers who are at the moment just on furlough during the shutdown. That was not seen as something that was particularly popular around the country. And then Donald Trump also said that federal workers wouldn't be given back pay, which is the norm during a government shutdown. You're furloughed for a bit, but when you go back to work, you get that, whatever it was, 1 week or 2 weeks money back. And Donald Trump then said that maybe federal workers wouldn't get the back pay. He slightly changed his mind on that. But the reason Democrats are taking all of those little things as a kind of sign of some good, positive news that they have not had really since the inauguration is that it shows that Democrats are united at the moment and have a clear message they feel, and Republicans are sort of split on this. And I think that Donald Trump, being the kind of politically savvy person he is going to read the political winds here. Populists tend to be successful by talking about immigration, talking about national spirit, talking about us versus them. They don't tend to be successful by cutting government programs to the more working class voters that they represent. So I don't know if the Democrats are feeling a little too optimistic too soon, but it seems to me that this has been a better week for them than it has for Republicans when it comes to this shutdown. Just politically, what do you think?
Listen, I mean, I think you're spot on, but I want to go to some of the polls, Katty, and then give you what I think based on knowing some of these congressmen, because I know some of them personally. I've given money to some of them, Democrats and Republicans. The Democrats, surprisingly, are together. So I just want to state to everybody, I got that wrong. I thought they would be fractured going into this. I thought the Republicans would best them. But let's just go to the polls. Washington Post saying 47% say Trump and the Republicans are mostly responsible versus 30% blaming the Democrats.
That's quite a big difference, right?
Big difference. But this is the more telling poll, the recent. This is like yesterday's poll. Reuters Ipsos is basically saying 67% hold Republicans largely responsible. Okay, now, these polls are, I think, a signal to the Democrats we got to hang tough because the public tide is shifting in our favor. Last point, I think this is an important one because you said it and I just want to expound it. Trump is not in on some of these policies. Because remember what Trump said to me and remember what Trump believes. His base is fiscally liberal. They want the benefits. And Trump does not care if he borrows $10 trillion in the next 3 years to give his base the benefits. He doesn't care. He's a nihilist. He's not thinking about legacy. He's not thinking about what's going to happen to our country after this. I mean, us on Wall Street are projecting a 2035 $48 to $50 trillion deficit. That's another $14 to $15 trillion of additional spending, $1.5 trillion of interest carry charges on that debt. which is unsustainable, which is why the word on Wall Street from places like JP Morgan is debasement of the currency, which is why, people like me have bought some gold and Bitcoin, et cetera. And Trump doesn't care. So I think you're going to be right, Katty. I think Trump is going to go to these guys and say, hey, we're folding our cards here, give them what they want. And even though the deficit hawks on his side want to hold the ground on this because they're worried about what I just said, I think they're going to capitulate to the Democrats now. And I got this wrong. My early judgment on this was wrong. And I've shifted my opinion now.
And I think also, look, the other thing that's happening during the shutdown is that you're starting to have flight delays around the country. Americans like nothing less than sitting at LaGuardia Airport, not being able to get out of New York City because of flight delays. And that's happening because there are fewer federal aviation officials working at the moment. So I think just the impact of the shutdown, which probably isn't being felt everywhere around the city yet, it's only been 9 days, that will start to be felt and could exacerbate the problem for the Republicans on this. What's interesting, I think, about this moment, and the conversation I had with Molly Murphy was so interesting, is that up until now, what we've seen is that Republicans may have lost support on some issues, even immigration, even inflation, handling of the economy, but Democrats haven't been able to capitalize on it. Democrats have been kind of out in the political wilderness and they haven't managed to seize the moment. And she said, this is the first time, and it's early days, it's only been a week, but she said it's the first time that she's seen Democrats actually manage to take some of that support that the Republicans have been losing. So I think the shutdown could be interesting. Whether it has an impact on the midterm elections, who knows? Our memories are short and that is a long, long time away. So we'll see. But it is interesting to see the Democrats actually having a better week.
Katty, as you're saying all this stuff, I'm just reflecting on two men, Senator Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, who you and I think, meh, right? To use a millennial expression. What are these guys doing? We're going to write a letter. Trump is destroying the democracy. He's setting the Constitution on fire. Let's write a letter, Katty K. I mean, am I wrong about it? Why don't they get these people in a caucus room and say, hey, guys, we're winning. Let's line up and let's have a direct narrative to our constituents and the American people.
Well, they might want a few committee meetings beforehand before they decide whether to write the letter. That's a wrap for today's episode, I think. We will be back to talk about Gaza next Monday. But as we said at the top, if you want to go even deeper into Trump world and the ideology behind what's happening with many of these things, do sign up at therestispoliticsus.com to get the inside scoop on the man pulling the strings, the architect of Trump's most controversial policies. That is, of course, Stephen Miller. Do sign up at therestispoliticsus.com.
We'll see you guys soon. Thanks again.
See you soon.